Hey, this time I'm going to go over the inspector in its entirety as an inspector overview. This will relate quite closely to the developer tooltip, but we already have, linked in the video description, a video on the developer tooltip. This goes over all the settings of the developer tooltip and what it can do, but the two are quite closely related, so you may need to watch both to figure it all out. I wanted to separate them because I try to keep my videos less than 20 minutes long, and if I did both, that would be quite long. Jason is from the Meta Movie Project, and you can find some links to that in the video description as well. I wanted to give a quick shout out to that because it's an awesome project that involves a movie in virtual reality where you play a character in the scene, as do other real-time actors. So there's other actors talking to you in the scene, and you go through this experience. It's great. Check it out. It's in the video description. We'll go over here into Smooth POV, and we'll get started. I'm going to equip a developer toolkit here. You can find one in Essential Tools if you don't have it, and we're going to go ahead and start by opening an inspector. There are two ways that you can do this. The first way is just with nothing selected, so I've just equipped this developer tooltip, I've got nothing selected, and I can go to Open Inspector. This will open the inspector in the world root. The second way that you can do it is by selecting an object. So here I'm going to select the world, because you can select the world too. You'll see that there is a pink box. It might be sort of faded on the screen, but you can also see a gizmo below there, which is the gizmo for the world. I'll also link in the video description a video on gizmos. There's a lot going on there. And you can open Inspector, and you'll see that we're down here in meeting space 1. Let's go ahead and close that. So that's the second way to open inspectors. Now that we've covered both of the ways to open inspectors, well, both of the main ways, there are other ways, we'll go over them as we go. Let's cover what the inspector layout looks like. So this UI might be daunting when you first open it, but the more you look at it, the more you should sort of realize that it's sort of like the right-hand panel on Unity, whereby there is a list of, there's a list on in Unity, there's a list of components and things in the scene on the left usually, and then on the right, there is what you would see on the right here. So you can imagine this is the same, where we've got a list of components within the scene, or in this case slots, that's what we call them in Neos, on the left-hand side of the screen, and there's a list of components on those slots on the right-hand side of the screen. I don't have any slots selected right now, so there's nothing on this right-hand side of the screen. So just keep it in mind. Items within the scene are on the left, and then its components or its properties are on the right here. Let's go ahead and select something so you can see what that looks like. So we're going to go ahead and select the sun, which is also known as light in most worlds. There's a video that I have about the default parts of a world root when you create a new world. I'll link that in the video description as well. That goes over what you might see in the world root and what everything does. Light is basically the sun. Now that I've got it selected, you'll now see that we have that two-sided experience. We've got the components and the properties on the right, and we've got the slots and the things in the scene on the left here. We're going to go over and we're going to start on the top line here and move our way down. There is a lot to cover here, so do keep things in mind. Of notice first of all to start with, this inspector, along with a couple of other UIs, the first actually have a help dialog. The help dialog can be opened by clicking this question mark. It is quite long and it is all text-based, but you can read this all within just one sitting to try and figure out what's going on or refer back to it. I wanted to point that out because the Neos team typed up the information for you and not a lot of people know it's there, so please go ahead and read it. It may help you out one day. Next to that is the location marker. What this will do is parent the inspector to you. You'll see it changes color. It changes this sort of more reddy color. And what that means is when I move around, it's attached to me. I need to use this more because I lose inspectors all the time. If you leave one like this attached to you and you teleport or you move around the scene, it'll follow you around and you can keep it with you. You can also put it anywhere really, and then it'll still follow you around, which is super useful to sort of, set up your work scene and then fly around the world with a small area in the middle which doesn't have inspectors in it. Like you can have one up here, one up here, one up here, and then just fly around in the middle, and then you'll have everything that you need. That's the top bar. Moving on, we've got the next bar. We'll call this sort of the header bar. It's got this part of here, so all these buttons across here. So let's go through it. So on the left here, you'll see root, which doesn't make much more sense, but it will if we look at some other stuff. Root : refers to a label for the currently selected root of the inspector. To better illustrate this, I'm going to go down to the world here, and I'm going to push this button over on the right here, which looks like an arrow pointing to the right and then down. It means like descend. And what this does is it will take the inspector and it will reset the root of the inspector to the object that's selected. You can see which one's selected by this green color. So let's go ahead and click this button, and you'll see that we descend down, and now the root here has changed to : world, which means we've now selected the world. So that's that label for you. It shows you usually what the top here, or the selected slot is up here. To the right of that are two arrows. I call this the fat arrow and the thin arrow, just for sort of clarity. When I say that to people that are new to inspectors, they usually get it. the fat arrow will go up to the top or the object root of an object. For information on what the object root is, I also have a video on object roots, but I'll also explain it here. An object can have a root about it, so an avatar has an object root. And what that basically means is like, what is the top sort of primary slot that is associated with an object? So for example, the object root of an avatar would be the top slot of the avatar where everything else is beneath it. The top slot of a world might be this world slot here, or it might be the root slot depending on how you set it up. That one's super useful for inspecting avatars. Let me show you the difference. So if I inspect my hand here by selecting my hand and then going to Open Inspector, you'll see that I'm on the left hands collider. If I hit up once, you'll see that we go to left W, which is my left wrist. My bones are a little bit renamed. If I hit this big up arrow now, we jump all the way up to the top of the avatar, which is called Entity. That's the name of the avatar. And then you'll see all of the components about the avatar. So that's the difference. If I were to do that again, it would actually take me about 2 or 3 or 4 maybe button pushes to get all the way up there. So I'm still on this is left arm, left shoulder, chest, spine, root of the armature again. It's fun. Root node, centered root, and then we're back up there. So it's a good shortcut to get around. That also showed you what the one on the right here was, which just ascends 1 level. I mix and match these depending on what I need to do. Sometimes I'll hit the wrong one. It doesn't really matter. So that's that button. On the right here, we've then got the slot that is selected. So this can be different from what the root is. So if we go back down to the root again, and again, we're going to use this right arrow that descends to descend, you'll see that the root selected here is world, but I could also select here point. This is, I believe, yeah, it's the point light that just brightens up the table in the middle of the room here. So now you'll see on the right here, we've got slot point, which means this is the slot that we're inspecting, but this is the root of the inspector. On the left here is still the world. To the right of that are the red trash can and pink trash can. I love it when people ask what the pink trash can is. For reference as we go into these buttons, I know that they're unclear. This isn't intentional. It isn't like Neos is trying to make things difficult. It's just that the inspector is due for a rework to make it clearer what it's doing. When it's reworked, these icons will be made to be more clearer. If you've noticed some of the newer icons, for example, the ones in the hand menu here, these have all been created in-house by usually Coffee, who's a great person at making icons, and you'll see that the icons in the hand menus are much clearer. These icons will be much clearer later too. The red trash can will delete the object. The pink it will delete the object and it will delete all assets about the object. The pink trash can will delete it, preserving all assets. This is a little tricky to show, and it's going to take a few minutes, so do stand by. This video is probably going to go quite long, so I'm going to go ahead and add chapters. Chapters is a feature on YouTube where you can skip through chapters if you're not interested. So if you know what the red trash can and the pink trash can do, feel free to skip on to the next chapter. Otherwise, let's get going. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a box. Create new 3D model box, and so now we've got a box. And I'm also going to create a material to put on the box. So materials, we use unlit here. The reason I'm using unlit is because it'll be nice and bright and we can visually look at it. I'm going to make this material a sort of bright green. Now I need to apply this material to the box. We can do this in a number of ways. I'm going to use the inspector to do it. This is the inspector tutorial otherwise, but I would usually do this using a material tooltip. Either way is fine. So we're just going to select this box, go to Open Inspector, and then set the material on the box. It also provides a useful shortcut to show what's going on here. So now you can see that this box has this material set on it. Now, usually when I go ahead and I would delete a material orb like this, I would grab it, and I would grab it like this, and then I would use the destroy menu on my hand menu. When you use destroy here, it does the pink trash can, even though it's right here, I know. It does the pink trash can, which means it preserves the assets. What this means is when I delete it, you'll see that the box is still green, and that's because what it did was it Neos sensed that the green material here was still being used, and so when it was deleted, it preserved the assets, and it preserved the assets by sending them to the assets folder. The assets folder is up here in the world root, and it contains stuff that is being used by objects that don't, objects that need them, etc. So here you can see unlit down here has an unlit underneath it, and this is the green material which is on the box now. So it's moved it from the world root into the assets root. Don't touch the assets root that much, just let it do its thing. You can control it in some ways. I'll go over those at some point, maybe in sort of world cleanup or cache maintenance. You don't really need to look at it though. So let's continue here. So what we're going to do here is just deselect everything because I've got a bit of a mess going on here. And we're going to go ahead and create another material. So I'm going to go to create new materials, unlit, and we're going to make this one bright blue instead. So here's a bright blue one. And then we're going to put this again onto that. So now the cube is blue, and you can see that the cube's materials are this unlit material on unlit. I know unlit material on unlit doesn't make much sense, but let's go ahead and explain what's going on there. It's using a unlit material which is on the object called unlit, which actually happens to be this ball here. So if I inspect this ball, so I'm going to aim my laser at it, hit secondary, and then open inspector, you'll now see that the root is unlit, and this is the unlit material. So if I go ahead and change the properties of this material, you see it changes to white. We're actually going to keep it as blue though. If I go ahead and rename this, and I'll call this blue, you'll now see that the, actually that's not updated. It might update if we go ahead and refresh it. So to refresh it, I'm just going to unselect it and then reselect it. There we go. So now you'll see it says unlit material on blue. So I can see that this material here is being used on this material, on this box. So before, when I used the hand menu there, I used the pink trash can without realizing it, because the hand menu always uses the pink trash can. That's a good model to use, because when people delete stuff in the world, they usually will mean the pink trash can. But because you're in the inspector, you have sort of ultimate authority over the scene, as you can choose what you want to do. So here what I'm going to do is I've got the blue material selected, and it's in the root of my inspector. I'm going to use the red trash can, and this will not preserve the assets. So let's go ahead and do that red trash can. And that material went. Not only did that material go, but this box is now this horrible sort of Z-fighting checkerboard material. Let's see what happened to the mesh render. You'll see the mesh render is null, and that's because it deleted the asset outright. That's what the red trash can does. In most cases, you'll need to use the red trash can within the inspector. I don't really see many use cases of using the pink one, other than the material use case. If your materials ever vanish or go missing, it's because you've deleted them using the red trash can. But honestly, when I'm using materials, I usually just use the hand menu to clean them up, because they're usually just balls floating within the scene, and I can use the hand menu to clean them up, which does the pink trash can. So in short, just to try and help you remember this, the pink trash can is what the hand menu does, and the red trash can is the ultimate authority over the scene, which the inspector can do, and it will destroy any assets. And there's an example of the asset being destroyed. So now this box still functions, but it doesn't have a material associated with it. Let's move on to the next menu. For that, we're going to start needing some empty objects just to play with, so I'm going to go ahead and create that for you. We use actually shapes. Shapes make this sort of process a little bit easier. So I'm going to go ahead and go to create menu, create new box. And now we've got another box out. Shrink that down just a little bit, and then we're going to go ahead and inspect it. With it open in the inspector, we can now talk about the next three buttons. I call this one up, star, and green square or duplicate, because I know what these all mean. This means actually, we'll go into them. So up here, what this will do is it will create a parent object above the box, parent the box to that new parent object, and then it will also set the transform of that parent object to the current transform of the box. So if you look at this box here, this box is at -5 on the X, +4 on the Y, and 8 on the Z. It's at a rotation of 118, and it's at a 0.2 roughly scale, right? So that's a lot of numbers that don't really mean anything, but just see that they're there. If I now go ahead and push this up arrow, this yellow up arrow, you'll see that the parent up here is now changed to slot on box dash parent, and its position, rotation, and scale have all been set to 0 or 1 when it comes to scale. Over here on the left, you can see that we're still selecting the box here. So we've got the slot box on the right here, but we have root set to box dash parent, and that's because the parent has been created. So this is the parent I was talking about, and the box here has been created underneath it. I can now go ahead and select this box, and you'll see that it has similar values, in fact identical values, to that box that we previously set. So -5, 118, and 0.2 on the scale here. This is useful when you want to kind of lock an object into position. In fact, in a couple of videos, I called it locking an object into position, and maybe that's a useful terminology. Let me know if that makes sense. The reason I call that is because now that we've got a box that is parented to a box parent, we've got a much simpler transform here that we can play with. So for example here, if I want the box to move 1 unit to the right or left from its original position, instead of worrying about subtracting or adding its existing position in the world, I can just go ahead and type 1 in here. This is an example of a local versus a global transform. That's a video for another really big topic, which I keep trying to explain to people, and I know it's needed, so it's coming soon. So that's the up arrow. You can obviously do the up arrow recursively if you want. So if I wanted to make box parent have its own parent, I can go up, but then you get box parent parent. Quick note here, please name your slots. I go through the world sometimes and I see box parent, 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 child, parent, parent, and I'm just like, what does any of this mean? And the answer is it doesn't really mean anything. Okay, let's go on next to the star. So I'm going to go ahead and clean up, because sometimes it's just better to start with a clean fresh. So we're going to go ahead and create new 3D model box. We've got an alice box again, shrink this down, and inspect the box again. And now I'm on the box here. I'm going to hit the star. What star does is it goes down. It makes a child beneath it. So remember that the up arrow created a object above the box and parented the object to that box. The star will go down and create a new object which is parented to the box. So let's go ahead and do that. I hit star and you'll see that we've got box child. So child is now an object of that is a child of the box, which is its parent. And so now I can move this around here, and you'll see that I'm changing the child's position, but not the box's position. Star is really useful for creating sort of, control slots or, added sort of added context slots here. So for example here, if I wanted to add some logics to the box here, I would use the star. I would go to the box here, I would then hit star, and then I would come down here to box child, and then I would rename it to box-logics. Which is another note of just personal preference. When you create a child object like this, it will call itself box-child. And I see a lot of people just back that all out and they'll just call it logics. I find that really confusing because I look at my my tooltip and it's got logics on it and I'm like, ooh, whose logics? Which logics? If you leave it like this, box-logics, and it's then on your developer on your logics tip saying box-logics, you're like, it's the logics for the box. That makes sense. So then you might want to pack logics into this box. If you're interested in packing and unpacking, check my overview of the logics tip. That goes into it a little bit. It's not sort of beginner friendly. I do want to do a beginner logics tutorial at some point, but just know that the star is something I commonly use for logics. It's also something I commonly use for adding a bunch of components, etc. That's the star. I'm now going to go ahead and delete that box-logic sock because we can actually show the next one, which is the square, which is the copy object. We can show that a lot easily, more easily. It would be a better, more grammatically a correct way of saying that, if we already have this box here. So I'm going to go ahead and select the box, use the up arrow that we just used, and now we've got box parent. And now I've got the box selected, and I'm going to go ahead and hit star. And you'll see that what we've got here is a duplicate box. The star, sorry, not the star, the shape here, the square, the green square will duplicate the object which you have selected. So now we actually have two boxes. To prove that, I'm going to select the second box here and move it to the right. Let's go ahead and duplicate this box again. So I've got that box selected, duplicate. We've got another box, and I'm going to move that to the right as well. We've got three boxes here. So that's what it does. It duplicates it. It will also duplicate hierarchies. So if I go up to the top of the world here, and I duplicate box parent, I've now got a second box parent in the world, and I can move this up and down using the gizmos, and now you'll see we've got 6 cubes. That is the top bar, and well, both top bars, and we've been going for 18 minutes. Let's keep going. I do want to, not produce too many longer videos. They get less traffic, but it's an overview, so we'll keep going. Let's go ahead and clean up a little bit though. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all these boxes because we're going to go on to the top part of the slot inspector. If you're still here, thank you so much. There is a lot to cover here. Maybe I'll stop after this top bar and then we'll cover components next time. Yeah, that sounds like a good approach, yes. Okay, so what I've now got is I've got a box which I created in the scene and I'm now inspecting, and that's because we've got a simplified look here at this particular top area. So everything above the word parent underworld root will go over, and then we'll cut to maybe a part 2. Okay. So at the top here is the name. This should be quite straightforward, but do know that you can clear the name by hitting the little cross here, and it'll clear it, but we want it to be called box again. The name is just the name of the object. It's really entirely up to you. There are some objects which will look at that name to do something. An example here being camera anchors, which I just did a video on. And other things like that will just sort of automatically hook up to that name and name themselves. A lot of components which I build for UI and things will use the name property as a label, so you don't have to choose the label. Like I've got in my public folder, for example, a checkbox where there's a label to the right of the checkbox, and that's driven by the name of the checkbox, so I don't have to type it twice, basically. Just remember here that the name field here is a field, and we can You can write to it, you can value copy from it, you can override it, you can do all sorts that you want to do with it. It's like any other field. Beneath that is what's called the parent field. This is a lot more complicated than the name field, and that's because it's illustrating the parent of the object. So the parent of the object right now is the root of the object. Just want to make that a little bit simpler because it's never a good idea to play around with the root too much. So I'm going to go ahead and use the up arrow again, which we just talked about. And now you'll see that again, the parent has changed to slot box parent, which means it's updated to this box's parent. You can override the parent here by dragging in a different object. So for example here, if I go across to here, I do create new 3D model sphere. I inspect the sphere. Now I've got the sphere up here selected. What I can do is I can go ahead and drag the word sphere into parent here. And you'll see what happens in just a second. So let's watch this. What we're going to do here is grab sphere. So grab, you'll see sphere appears here. And we're going to drop it into parent. Did you see what happens? The box went over to the sphere and it jumped over there. And that's because when you do that operation there, you are saying go over to that new parent and keep the transform. So usually when you do moving objects between parents a different way, which I'll show you in just a moment, it will update the transform such that it is relative to existing position. But when you do it that way, it will update the object so that it doesn't touch the transform. The transform stays exactly the same. That could be super useful. I've actually got a separate video planned on that, which shows it in an example, which should make more sense. Let's cover moving it back now. So what we can do here is we can grab this box and reparent it to the box parent. To move it back, we can go ahead and grab box and then just drop it onto box parent. And you'll see it move back. But in this case, it stayed over there. And that's the difference. It stayed over there. And that's because when we moved it back, the engine calculated the relative difference in the transform and applied them. So now you can see that the box is at 9, 0.2. The approximate location of that sphere has been updated to because it's now parented under that using the other method. I can just go ahead here and do reset position, reset scale, rotation and scale, and we're back to the original box we had before that madness. This parent field is an example of what's called a slot reference field, and that you'll see these quite a lot. You'll also see, well, I guess a reference field would be a more appropriate term. You'll see that there are two buttons to the left of the name of the reference here. There is the up arrow, and there is the curved up arrow and the up arrow. They aren't that different, so I often confuse them. If you push the curved up arrow, then what you get is a inspector of the object which you selected on. So here I've got the box parent selected, so that made an inspector of the box parent. That's a good way to sort of duplicate inspectors. And if you do it the other way, which is pushing the little up arrow, then in this case the same thing will happen, but that's not the case for all occurrences of that button, so do keep that in mind. Maybe we'll go over that when we do some other parts of the inspector. Beneath that is the tag. Tags I go over in a video called Tags and why they aren't evil. That's a bit because tags historically were used for evil purposes, but these days they can be used for, used for good. Tags are on their redemption arc, yes. A tag is basically a category or a categorization of an object. So in the case of this box here, I might say its tag is shape. So I can just type in shape there. It's just a string. You can use it for pretty much whatever you want, except for data storage. Do not use it for data storage. Don't put numbers in here. Don't put people's names in here. Think of it as a categorization system. You know, if you're playing a game or in a library and you're like, I want to go to the biology section of the library, the tag of a book in the biology section would be biology maybe, so that you could find all books that were to do with biology by just looking for the tag biology. Beneath that is active. Active turns on and off an object. It's really easy to see, so on, off, on, off. That works sort of mixedly depending on what you're doing. So in some cases it will stop what the object is doing. So if you imagine there's an animation happening, like the cube's bouncing up and down or something, in some cases it will stop bouncing up and down when you push active, and in some cases it won't. It really does depend on how you're moving it up and down. That's really a subject for sort of like, you know, each individual use case of the active box. You know, it's not something I can give overarching rule of thumbs about. Do keep in mind though. Actives are used a lot to sort of hide things. Do bear in mind that when you set something to inactive, it is still there, and if it's a model, for example, your avatar or part of your avatar, it is still transmitted to other people in the server or in the session, and that's because if you suddenly set active to true or checked on, it needs to appear there, and so that means that it's not hidden. There is still a performance cost for it being there in terms of memory and it existing. Beneath that is position, rotation, and scale. Position is the position of an object. I could probably talk about position for equally as lengthily as I've been talking about the inspector, so I'll go over that in a different video. It's essentially the Cartesian coordinates of the object within the world. You can see down here in red, yellow, and blue is what it means. X is right and left, Y is up and down, and Z is forward and backwards. Easiest way to look at X, Y, and Z here is to go ahead and inspect an object using the, select an object using the developer tooltip, and then you'll get the gizmo, and then these map quite well. So if I move this to the right here, you'll see that the X value has gone up. If I move it to the left, you'll see that the X value has gone down. If I move it up, you'll see that the Y value has increased. If I move it down, you see the Y value has decreased. Same with Z, although that's a little bit more difficult to show at the same time because it's on a different angle. There we go. Check the Gizmo video for more information on that one, but do remember you can type values in here. A common question I see is why these values get so long and so precise. And that's because when you're using gizmos like this, there's no way to be incredibly precise. You can't move this along by exactly 4 units. You can with snapping, but that's another topic. Don't worry about it. Another thing that you might see is when you touch one arrow, for example, here I'm just going to touch Y. You'll see that X and Z move around a little bit. That's just the game engine trying to be as precise as possible. Don't worry about it. I will usually clean these if I want less sort of cognitive load on my brain about where they are, but it's equivalent. You don't really need to touch them. And in fact, if you're flinging objects around in your scene or passing objects between each other in a scene, those values are going to be completely random and you'll never see them, so don't really worry about it. Rotation here is slightly different. It looks like it's the same, but it's different. Rotations in Neos under the hood are done using quaternarians. It's a topic which is for another day because quaternarians use these really weird sort of imaginary numbers, and they're basically really hard to explain. What they're displayed as in the rotation field here, though, is what are called Euler angles. And so it means if I go ahead and I rotate this by 90 degrees on the X, actually cubes might look different, so I have to use 45 degrees here. If I rotate it by 45 degrees on the x-axis, you'll see that it's rotated towards me a little bit here, and it's now at an angle. Again, you can use the gizmo here to visualize which axis you're going through. I will do a video on quaternarians at some point. I just need to understand them myself. I kind of just fumble my way through them, and so I'm not really that educated to speak about them right now. I am doing lots of research to get better at them, though. That's rotation. Beneath that is scale. Scale changes how big an object is. You can go lower than 1, so you can go to like 0.5 scale, 0.1 scale, etc. I do believe you can go negative, but I wouldn't advise it. It will cause weird things to happen. In this case, it's just ignored, which is great. Sometimes I've seen weird things happen with negative scale, although that might be procedural meshes and something like that. Avoid negative scale. It doesn't make any sense. Also avoid non-uniform scale. I have a video on that one, which is in the description as well. Sorry, this is like a homework video. You know, it's just like, look at this video, look at this video. They all have great information in them, so I hope they're useful. Beneath this is order offset. Honestly, don't touch order offset. It does do stuff. To briefly show what it does, if I've got a box here called 1, a box here called 2, and a box here called 3. If I go to box 3 here on the left here, and I change its order offset to actually we'll have to do it for box 2, sorry. If I change box 2's order offset to 9001, you'll see that the order has changed here. It now goes box 1, box 3, box 2, and that's because its order offset is higher. I'd recommend wherever possible just leaving this alone. There are some cases where you'll need it. I don't recommend obsessing over it. If you obsess over it, you'll come into problems because some components, some logics nodes, and some processes will change the order offset on your behalf, and some components such as UIX ignore it in some cases and don't ignore it in some cases. It's like entirely up to the component how it deals with it. So don't worry about it is what I'm saying. Like, use it if you absolutely need to, and there may be some cases in the future where I do tutorials where we do need to use it, but don't worry about it otherwise. Beneath that is the position indicator, which I talked about before, x plus minus, y. I sometimes find these hard to read. I am a little bit colorblind, so the red one's really bright and the blue one's really dark for me, but I only read them from time to time anyway. They're just a visual indicator to show you, hey, what's going on. The next 3 buttons should be really easy to cover, actually. Reset position will set the position to 0, 0, 0. Reset rotation will set the rotation to 0, 0, 0. Reset scale will set the scale to 1, 1, 1. There you go. These are really useful if you've kind of made a mess. So for example here, I'm just going to play around with the gizmos here and make a right mess of this cube, right? So we've sort of got a weird angle, a weird scale. Oops, fell off. And, super weird. Okay, cool. Reset position. It's back to where it was. Reset rotation. It's back to the correct shape. Rotation. Reset scale. It's back to the correct scale. That's those 3 buttons. Create pivot at center. Ooh, this one's tricky. Let's go back down to 1 cube for this. So now we're back down to 1 cube. This will create a pivot at the center of 2 objects. Let me see if I've got the appropriate setup here. So you'll see that right now, the center of the box 1 object here is right in the center of the cube, which is totally ideal. That's perfect. That's perfect. But if we go back up to box parent here, you'll see that the origin of box parent here is in the middle, nowhere near this cube, and so it doesn't. Sometimes it might not make sense what's going on here. In particular, if I go ahead and make another cube, let me just reset the rotation here. So now we've got 2 cubes and reset that rotation as well, and then cube number 2 here. I'm just going to go move it like that. Let's create a 3rd one actually, just to really drive this point home. And move it all the way back over here. So now let's say I wanted to move this box around, this collection of boxes around using the gizmos or using the coordinate system. It's really difficult because the center isn't where I think it would be. Like any reasonable person would expect the center of these 3 cubes to be the center of the 3 cubes, which is indicated by this yellow dot here, but it isn't indicated by the gizmo, and that's because its pivot or its origin is different. So you can see I'm moving it here, and it's moving relative to that point there rather than this point here in the center. If I want to change that, all I can do here is go up to the box parent here and hit create pivot at center. And what that will do is it will parent it to a new object called dash pivots, in this case box parent pivot, which has adjusted the transform such that box parent is offset in such a way that the parent above it can have a pivot in the center here, and now everything moves from the center. I cannot stress enough that create pivot at center is a great tool for moving stuff around. If you ever get confused, especially when you're importing your models from various sources, try create pivot at center. It will look at the bounding boxes of all of the things underneath it and create a pivot at the center of that. If you're familiar with Blender, it's the same as the sort of set origin tools there, but it needs to use parents. This is the way it's done in Neos. It creates parents above it so that it can adjust everything such that the origin is at the center. That is create pivot at center. Let's go on to jump to and bring to. I guess for those ones, it might be a bit better if I go ahead and step outside for a moment. So now I'm outside. If I use this handy dandy location button at the top here that I mentioned, I can hit jump to, back at the cube here. This is great if you're like, hey, what's that? What's that in my world inspector? I don't know what that is. Jump to, it shows you exactly where it is, and it shows you where it is in context. The one beneath that, bring to, will teleport the object to you. I believe Gearbell originally requested this. Thank you so much, Gearbell. And thanks to the Neos team for adding it. You see that cube's over there, and I'm floating over the endless doom over here. If I hit bring to, boop, there's the cube. It's been brought to me. So then again, that's useful sort of, tidying up your world, basically. I will hit this button at the top here to parent the inspector to me, and then use jump to a lot when I'm tidying up worlds before I publish them. That is jump to and bring to. Last one here is parent under world root. If you hit parent under world root, it will parent under the world root. So you'll see here currently B1 is parented to box parent, which is parented to box parent pivot. If I go ahead and hit parent under world root, you'll see that the box vanishes from there. And if I go up to the world root here, you'll see that we now have B1, which is parented to the world root. Those are the buttons at the top of the slot inspector. We're going to go on to part 2 now because I've ran out of time, really. This video is now 34 minutes long. Anyone that's still with me, thank you so much. Like I said, there are chapters on the video. Let me know if the long videos are problematic. Like, it's sometimes hard to delineate between where a video starts and stops. This is a nice stopping point, but there is a lot more I want to say, so we'll just launch straight into part 2 after this. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.